Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Getting to Better Together, the podcast series that we're running here from the University of the Sunshine Coast through the Centre for International Development, Social Entrepreneurship and Leadership. And before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the original custodians of this land, the Gubbi Gubbi people, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Up to this point in this series, we've tended to focus on the large global pictures, the underlying themes, I guess, of getting to better together. We've looked briefly at Aboriginality, we've discussed worldviews, we've discussed relationships between activist groups and local councils. We've looked at the world of commerce and business, and most recently, the idea of thinking about the future and learning from it. Well, today, it's my very great pleasure to talk with Amber Scott. Amber is involved in an extraordinarily rich project, and I'm going to ask her where that is in just a moment. But the theme of this particular episode will move from the global to the local, but within a global context. So this is a perfect example of glocal, and it really is a wonderful example of getting to better together. So let me welcome Amber.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Let me start off by asking you exactly where the Mary Valley is and Kandanga.
So Kandanga is in the Mary Valley, and the Mary Valley is about 2 hours north of Brisbane. Most people know where Noosa is, so we're directly west of there by about 50 or 60 kilometres. So the Sunshine Coast hinterland.
So it's sort of subish tropical?
Yes, subtropical, definitely.
And you have, as I understand it, 4 major enterprises or areas of interest: the farm itself, the store, the kitchen, and the courses that you run. And I love your 3 mantras, and I want to ask you to expand on those. The first is, we believe in good food, we believe in farmers, and we believe in you. Say more about those.
Okay, so yes, what you said is correct. We have the Kandanga Farm store at Kandanga, and it started as a traditional rural supply store selling things like polypipe fittings, fencing gear, all that type of thing. Because we have a very fundamental belief in agriculture, because we believe that it underpins all of civilization, we don't get to have theologians and philosophers and artists and sculptors if they are scrabbling around looking for food to eat. So agriculture can underpin the development of culture. It's very, very important. And so that's why we believe in food, because that's what comes from agricultural production. And then we believe in the farmers. They're the people that produce food. And I think we've really become totally disconnected from food itself and where it comes from and the people who produce it. And I think when I talk to farmers, I feel sometimes that they're the bad guy and that somehow they're considered to be environmental vandals. And sometimes I think they're disconnected also from what they're producing as well. And so they don't think, in the effort to grow more and to be more profitable or to just to survive, they lose connection with what they're doing, which is nourishing people. Everything that we're doing is about stepping back to what's fundamental in that food. It nourishes people, so we've got to concentrate on what do we need to do to nourish people, and then what do we do to nourish the people who are nourishing us, which is the farmers. And then the third step, or the third part of that picture then, is obviously the consumer, the person that's eating that food. Again, because of agriculture, you can have people who don't actually have to make their living directly by producing what they're going to eat, but they should be absolutely, totally part of the process of food. And we're the only species that doesn't spend all of their time thinking about where their next meal is coming from. If you look at any of nature documentary, that's what it's about. It's basically either mating or eating or defending oneself. And for most of us, we don't have a second thought about it. And I think that's wrong. I think we should be thinking about our food, and it underpins how we feel. It underpins our health. It underpins families when we come together to eat. It underpins communities where, again, we are brought together by the production of food or value adding to food or eating food together. All celebrations are based around food, really, and there's a reason for that. It's so important.
You stress good food. Tell us a little bit more about what you understand as good food.
So there's plenty of literature out there. You can do a Google search that shows you how the food we eat today, the nutritional value of it is less than what it was 50 years, 100 years ago. And that's in a large part due to the way that we produce food. And I went to uni, I did agribusiness. Everything's about economies of scale, getting bigger, reducing your costs, increasing your revenue. It's never about, we never learned anything about flavour or about nutritional content. It was basically about the business of food and making as much as you can for as little input required. And that's not what food should be. Food is about, again, coming back to nourishing people. And it might not be the biggest and the most good looking and the quickest way to turn over your produce. It's about nutrient density, and there's not really any way to cheat that. It's since time began, nature has processes, and when we try and cheat them or supersede them or make them better, then usually something suffers, and that's the quality of the food that we're eating.
We hear a lot and see a lot when we go to the supermarket about organic food and how good that is for us. Can you say a little bit more about what you understand as organic and why it is good for us?
We're certified organic, so I do believe in it. It's a word with a lot of levels and marketing sort of tied into it now. Organic, in its truest sense, means produced without any synthetic chemicals and something that comes of the earth. So that's its truest form. But if you see organic produce in the supermarket, I would always choose to buy it. Well, actually, go back a step, I probably wouldn't be buying it from the supermarket, but I would choose to buy organic over conventional. But just because something's grown organically doesn't mean it's actually being grown in a way where it has that nutrient density, because again, if you're looking at farmers trying to make an income, and the way that they're paid is by the kilos that they produce. The quicker they can produce the kilos and the more kilos they can produce, obviously the more profitable they are. And that's not necessary. There's a disconnect there, and that's one of the little projects we're trying to get off the ground, and we're looking for people who have far more experience with us, is how we change the system so that we pay for food based on nutritional content or nutrient density rather than kilos, because that would change agriculture.
And by nutrient density, you mean the essentially the quality of the food in any given weight, presumably.
Yes, that's right. And it's really, when you start looking into it, it's a really difficult thing to define, because is the nutrient density of an apple is what makes it a nutrient dense product. Is that the same as what it would be in meat or in flour? I don't even know what the parameters are that we need to measure to be able to work it out, but I'm sure it's possible. Everything's possible.
Well, it's a great concept, isn't it? The notion that in a small bite you can get a damn sight more good than you would in any other form.
I think like a really good example of that most people can understand is you talk about the hot box chicken at the supermarket, and it will cost you say $11 or $12 to buy that chicken. And like I've got a husband and 2 kids, and my husband could eat that chicken by itself and knock it off and probably still look for something else after. If we buy one of the pasture-raised chickens from one of the farmers here in the valley, that chicken will feed all 4 of us, plus have enough for stock, plus probably sandwiches for the next day. And it's a smaller bird than probably what you're getting from the supermarket. And it's to do with its density of actual nutrition in that bird. And the flavour is ridiculous. It's so much better. It doesn't need to be added to with flavours and colours and all those things.
That's a wonderful example. You yourselves are farmers, of course.
So yeah, I'm actually from the city originally. I grew up in Brisbane. Always from a very early age have realised the connection between how I feel and what I eat. So food's always been a big part of my life and planning my next meal. I married a country boy from Western Queensland, and he grew up on a beef property. And now here we are in the Mary Valley, and we're beef producers, and we are certified organic, 100% grass-fed. And when we first came to the valley about 14 years ago, and we wanted to be in beef and to be organic, I went to basically every advisor, every rural store in the area, and they said, you're kidding yourself. If you want to be organic, you need to move west of the tick line, because there's too many parasites in this area. It's impossible. And so that is the definite view by pretty much everyone here in the valley that it's impossible to be organic for livestock production in this area because of parasites. Right. So we went down the chemical route for a while. I wouldn't have anything to do with the cattle. It was when we were just starting to have a family. I didn't want my children around them. It was ridiculous. I didn't want to eat our own meat. And eventually I said to my husband, if we can't do this organically, let's just get out and buy from someone who can, and not to be put off. He said, right, well, let's work it out. And so it's taken us about 10 years, but we've worked it out, and now, we're certified organic. And so, that question of what is organic, it isn't just the absence of chemicals. There's so much more to it. But from a marketing point of view and from a consumer perspective, I think it's worthwhile having trust in that organic logo, because it does mean the absence of. But on the farm itself, there's so many levels of organic production that really it comes down to knowing where your food comes from and trying to engage with the producer and knowing the provenance of your food. All those things are so important. And that's what we do a lot in the store, is whatever we serve in our cafe, we link it back to the person who produced that food. So consumers can know who they are. They can say, John grew these avocados, Amber and Tim produced this beef.
So you briefly mentioned the store there, Amber. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, we started in rural supplies, and the same thing when we first started. Go back a step. The whole Mary Valley was going to get dammed. Back in the early 2000s, it was announced that the Mary Valley would become the Traviston Dam. There was a massive fight by the community, and eventually it was overturned. But by that time, the government had actually bought a lot of the land in the valley, and so a lot of the farming that was happening here, those people left. It was a really bad time from a community point of view. Everything, people left, jobs were stopped, the houses went to rack and ruin, there was a lot of crime, all those sorts of things. Over time, properties got put onto the market and were then new people came in. So it's a fascinating social experiment, really, because it's very, very rare that you get a community with such upheaval where so many people leave and then so many new people come in. Yeah. So we started the store sort of at the end of that dam period, and the block that we got was actually a dam block. And in the first probably 6 months after we started, for every 5 people that came in, 2 were looking for a job and 2 were looking for a poison to kill something. And only one sort of person wanted to buy something. And when I think back on that now, I think that is just it shows exactly what a broken community we were in, what a broken system that was based on sort of lack and fear and death and all those things. And so, again, when we first started, all the business advisors that I talked to said, don't be ridiculous, because I said about wanting to do organic and regenerative focused things, and they said, no, that's the money's in the chemicals, and they were right. The rural store exists because it sells to farmers, and so the more that farmers need, the more inputs they need, the better the store does. But that's actually not a very sustainable, healthy system. Really, farms should be self-sustaining in my view. So it's pretty crazy for me to go into a rural store when I'm really my reason for being is to make myself redundant. But we went down the track again. Eventually we said, no, we're going to get out of all chemicals. We're going to focus on regenerative and organic solutions, which basically reduces your store income by 50 to 75%, because that's what a store normally sells in chemical. So we had to think very, very differently to have a viable business. And so that's when we sort of hand in hand, we realised that there was an opportunity for telling a story of local producers, for having more lifestyle things to engage end consumers. And so that's how the farm store sort of image was born, as well as having a cafe there that focuses on local food and telling the story. At the very start, we opened that kitchen up for other producers who wanted to do value addings to try and capture more of the retail dollar. We've grown so much now that we actually don't have space for people to do it during the week. So they have to come after hours if they want to use the kitchen. Again, then we could sell the things that they were producing, whether it's jams or chutneys, and we could sell that through the store and tell that story. And again, we don't want everything to be ours. We love supporting other local small businesses and building that community. And running a cafe was sort of, I've always wanted to be in food, but it wasn't really my agenda. But we realised there's not, because of the whole dam thing, so many businesses left. There's not that much business in the valley. And we believe the community really needs that sort of hub, that focal point, somewhere to come. So we try to be that for people as well.
That actually puts a nice little turn to the phrase, this damn thing, doesn't it? When you sort of set out to work with the community, how did you do that? Did you do it one-on-one, or did you hold little focus groups, or the store become a sort of centre of conversation?
It's a really tricky one because, again, our view about the regenerative organic, and as I said before, we're the exception, we're not the norm. And so we've actually copped a fair bit of criticism and been called environmental vandals, we're naive, all of those things. So if we gave, this is at the risk of offending more people, if we went in and gave people what they wanted, I think we wouldn't be doing what we believe needs to happen. So we've kind of pushed our own agenda because we genuinely believe that is the future of the world and the future of agriculture. And in so doing, we have attracted people from across Australia, not just locally, and within the community. There, especially the new people that have come in who don't have any background in ag but want to get in there, we've attracted them, and so we talk to them about what they want. And one of the beautiful things about what we do is that because I get to talk to so many people, I can help them make connections with each other. So one person will come in with an issue and someone else will come in and I'll talk to them and I'll realise, these two should talk, and then they do talk, and little kind of micro businesses and things have popped up out of that, which is pretty fantastic. It's like this beautiful web that becomes the basis of a very resilient community.
We had Kathy McGowan on recently, who was the independent member for Indy, who herself is a farmer, and she was talking about how politics could be dramatically changed by people who in the community felt they had a larger voice, as it were. And I think what you're doing actually does precisely that. It gives a whole lot of people a voice in a new, fresh context, which itself is challenging. You mentioned the word sustainability, for instance, and sustainability is even more slippery than organic, isn't it? So that when people say, what do you mean by sustainable farming? The answer is more difficult even than saying, well, this is what we're doing organically.
Absolutely, and as it's often pointed out, if we kept going the way we are right now, which is sustainable, that's actually not great. And so the new word is regenerative, which I love. I think it's a great word, but it is also becoming used for marketing and for greenwashing, and there is no standard of regenerative, so anyone can say that they're regenerative without any kind of justification of what that means. So that's dangerous as well, and the only way around it, again, is by people taking an active interest in where their food is coming from and getting to know the people that produce it. And small-scale producers, we're just so perfectly placed for that, especially here. We're so close to the Sunshine Coast, so close to Brisbane. I mean, we should be telling that story. It's much harder for our bigger producers further away from the cities and the high population areas to do that.
Amber, this has been a fascinating conversation. I'd like at some stage to come back again in the future and talk more about what it is you're doing. In the meantime, can you give us some indication of how people can contact you? You have a website, right?
Yeah, our website's kanangafarmstore.com.au, and we're also Facebook and Instagram with that same name.
Just out of interest, I come from a farm which was considered to be regenerative because I was born actually before the Second World War, and we had no chemicals. There were no chemicals around. And so I was educated in agricultural science. And through my education, I could see the farm from which I came being destroyed by all the things you've been talking about, that we had to become more intensive and so on. And so I've been grappling with this now for 8 decades of how you actually bring these conflicting issues together.
Yeah, number one is people have got to start caring where their food comes from.
Yes, you're right. I agree with you.
That's the start of it all. I'll just add quickly, if we've got time, my daughter and I have been watching this fascinating show on YouTube called Absolute History. And it talks about, it's from Britain, and it talks about like the Edwardian era and then the Victorian era and like even the 1950s, and all these new inventions and things and developments that were happening then, how deadly and dangerous they were, but people adopted them because they were so excited because it was going to be time-consuming, these wondrous things. for example, electricity was one, and how you used to be able to plug all your appliances into the light socket because that's where it all came in just as raw power. There's no safety mechanisms or anything. And we look back on that now and go, that's insane. I think that's what's happening now with our industrial ag and chemicals, which, again, are promoted as labour-saving, silver bullet solutions. It's not going to be very long, hopefully, until we look back and go, what were we thinking? That's just madness.
It's certainly the changes in the air. I know Charles Massey, who wrote that wonderful book on regenerative agriculture, who we will also be interviewing very shortly. Amber, thanks so much. It's been terrific talking with you. You're a very busy woman, and I really appreciate the time you've taken. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for asking. I'm very chuffed.
Bye-bye.